Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over Hurricane Elsa, which recently developed into a Category 1 hurricane. This morning it was a tropical storm, and just very quickly it's already caught up near 75-mile-per-hour winds. We're going to be giving you updates on this storm, giving you all the information you need to know for this event. It looks like this will probably be moving closer to Florida and the southeast coast, but again, we still can't leave out the possibility that this moves into areas like Mississippi and Alabama. So we're going to be discussing which one of those is most likely, and again, just giving you all the information you need to know in today's video. Taking a look at the current National Weather Service page, you can see that we have some excessive heat warnings in that purple color for parts of the Northwest, as well as some heat advisories in the orange, which is also scattered throughout the Northwest as well. We have some red flag warnings, which is also scattered across parts of the Northwest and the Northern Plains. And then we have a few flood watches, which are just scattered and kind of just put over parts of New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. Other than that, we don't have many other watches or warnings currently in place. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 117 degrees in Death Valley, California, with a low temperature of 35 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah. We had a highest rainfall report in Tiff City, Missouri, where they got up to 3.28 inches of rainfall with no snowfall reports yesterday as well. Taking a look at the current National Hurricane Center forecast, you can see that we don't have any storms forecasted over the next 5 days in this entire area. The only storm right now is Hurricane Elsa, which is near the Windward Islands, just crossed over Barbados, and again, it's going to be continuing to move further to the west, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on in today's video, and talking about the track a little bit later on in today's video. Taking a look at the current satellite imagery, you can see that here is Hurricane Elsa. You can't even see any of the leeward or windward islands, which by the way, they're located right in here, so you can't even see any of the island chains or even Barbados as well, because the storm is covering it up with all of the clouds. But it currently is over parts of the windward islands, and it's kind of directly over Barbados by this point, so those areas are getting hammered with 50, 60, even 70-mile-per-hour winds at times. This is a fairly well-developed storm by this point. It did develop a fairly good core overnight, and that's one of the reasons that it was able to develop so quickly. If you looked at some of the model guidance from just 2 in the morning today, we were looking at this, we were looking at probably about 70% of the models not even getting this up to weak Category 1 status, and it was only at a mid-level tropical storm by that point. So you can see how much that has changed in just a matter of about 6 to 10 hours. So the model guidance has completely changed on the intensity, not so much on the storm track, but on the intensity, definitely, it has changed quite a bit, especially because we got a new aircraft recon data that went into the storm. We got one of the NOAA aircraft to actually go inside the storm, and we did get some new observations of winds closer to 70 to 75 miles per hour, and that's why they did upgrade it. So taking a look at the surface plot, you can see here's Barbados right here, and you can see Hurricane Elsa is just to the west of there. We have it located at 13.1 degrees north by 60.1 degrees west, maximum winds of 75 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 995 millibars, with a movement, so the storm is moving west-northwest at 28 miles per hour, so it is moving fairly quickly. Probably by today, this afternoon, it'll already be at the Windward Islands, so it is moving quite quickly, and eventually this will even be moving up into the Caribbean. Taking a look at the key messages here, and I'm not going to read them out all for you, but if you do want to, you can pause the video right here and just quickly overview this and read this for yourself. They're mainly just talking about the rainfall impacts, especially for areas like the Windward Islands, also for Puerto Rico, because we will be dealing with some of the rain on the northern end of this. We're also talking about, in the discussion, potentially some storm surge from this in parts of Hispaniola and Cuba, Potentially, that could even impact areas in Florida as well. Generally, because of the way that the storm's moving, you're getting the winds coming out of the west, and that's coming right onto the island. So that could cause some issues with storm surge. But again, if you do want to read this entire page for yourself, just pause the video right here, and you can quickly read this over. But I'm not going to read it right now. Taking a look at the current watches and warnings, you can see that we have in the blues some tropical storm warnings. So that covers pretty much the entirety of Hispaniola, and then also into parts of the Leeward Islands, on the Windward Islands, and also for Barbados. So we have some hurricane warnings in the red, and then we have tropical storm watches, which are in that yellow shade for the entirety or the rest of the Windward and Leeward Islands, and then also for Jamaica. And then we have hurricane watches up for parts of southern Haiti. So we're starting to get closer to this event impacting these areas, and therefore the National Hurricane Center is already putting up watches and warnings. We have tropical storm force winds, which is impacting this entire area in the orange, and that's impacting parts of the Windward Islands and the entirety of Barbados by this point. Taking a look at the forecasted cone track from the National Hurricane Center, they're expecting this to stay as a hurricane until sometime between Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. So my assumption is that because most of the strongest winds and most of the development is on the northern end of this storm by this point, as it's moving over the higher terrain of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, even though the core of the storm might be to the south, some of the stronger thunderstorms within the storm will probably get broken up by the higher terrain. That does not mean the entire storm will kind of break up. It will be able to redevelop before it hits Cuba, and then again in Cuba we have some higher mountains within eastern Cuba especially. So we have two different areas where this could definitely break apart. Once it gets past western Cuba, watch out for maybe another sign of redevelopment, because the entire area from western Cuba all the way up into Florida, even if it is on land, it's very flat land from that area onward, and then it's even very close to the water anyway, so it could still develop even if it's on land in Cuba or even in southern Florida. So we do want to watch out for that, for potentially some redevelopment after this moves into Cuba. But who knows, this might even stay a hurricane the entire way. We still don't know because of how drastically these models have shifted just recently. Right before I started recording, they issued the most recent batch of model updates. So luckily I checked before I started recording because they just issued these. We have the new model guidance. You can see that most of them are quite certain up until I would say the 48 to 72 hour mark, especially around the 72-hour mark is when they start to diverge. So before that, this is expected to, of course, move south of Puerto Rico, south of the Dominican Republic, into potentially just clipping southern Haiti, and again, maybe getting broken apart by some of these mountains in Hispaniola. They do go up quite high, so that could definitely help break apart these storms. And then we do get a lot of uncertainty as you get closer to Cuba. So again, we could potentially see on the eastern end of this, potentially more of this storm breaking apart because it'll be on land for a longer period of time, and also it'll be closer to the higher terrain. If this is further to the west, let's say kind of like this teal color right here, if this were to take kind of this track, then it would have a much better chance of developing, because it would be avoiding most of the mountainous terrain in eastern and in eastern and northern Cuba. So that's definitely something that you want to watch out for. The further west it goes, the higher chance that this stays as a hurricane, and the higher chance that this actually develops a little bit more. And then again, we still have no idea. Well, we have a fairly good idea, but we don't have a defined outlook on whether this will be going into the Gulf of Mexico or whether this will be making its way into Florida and then heading further east. For example, we have about 5 or 6 models that are bringing this into the kind of Big Bend of Florida, where in western Florida especially, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. That is also a possibility, and we could also be seeing another possibility where this goes through parts of western Florida, then comes out the other side of Florida, and then moves into the coastal parts of Georgia and South Carolina. That is also something that could happen. So again, there are still a lot of things that we have to sort out, and again, I think probably by another 2 days from now, as we're getting closer to Cuba, that's going to be when we're going to have a much better idea of what may happen, because Cuba is going to be the real decider on whether this goes right through the mountainous terrain and gets broken up, or whether this stays further to the south, doesn't get as affected by the terrain, and eventually just moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So again, we have many different outlooks on what could eventually happen. If you want to look at why this may happen, it's mainly because of this high pressure to the north. So we have a high pressure that's just north of the Caribbean, and this is going to be acting as a steering flow. So the high pressure is circulating winds somewhat like this. Here's your storm down here. So this is your storm right here, and this is going to be moving to the south of there and just kind of following the track of this high pressure. So we have a couple questions. Does this high pressure kind of meander further to the west? If so, then we're looking at probably a track that would take it closer to the Gulf of Mexico. If that doesn't happen, if this high pressure kind of just sits in place and it really doesn't move all that much, then we're probably looking at more of a track that would take it closer to the eastern part of Florida if this were to just kind of stay in place. So again, the high pressure, the upper air system is all going to be very, very important into how the storm develops. And I think the high pressure to the north is probably one of the most important factors into how this storm ends up moving through parts of the Caribbean and the in the southeast in general. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, and again, this is also the new intensity guidance that we just got. It's a very weak category 1, but it is expected to go up to at least middle level category 1 status. Even upper end category 1 status is possible, and even we have a couple models that are bringing this up near category 2, or even one model bringing this up to category 3 status. So again, I wouldn't even rule out a category 2 storm, and who knows, maybe even a very weak category 3. Hopefully we don't get that to happen. It does look like right around 60 to 72 hours, which by the way is the point when it's going to be impacting Cuba, is when this starts to weaken quite considerably. So again, Cuba is going to be probably their area where you get the most weakening from the storm, but it's also about how much does this weaken. If it weakens a lot, then we probably are just dealing with a weak tropical storm by that point. If this is a little bit stronger, then we're going into Florida talking about maybe a weak or moderate category 1, or even a little bit stronger than that. So we still have a couple things that we have to sort out here. Taking a look at the aircraft reconnaissance that just went through overnight tonight. We're going to kind of break this down. One thing that I want you to look at is this red circled area right here, and this is the flight level winds in the blue line. So we're looking at this is what they looked at, and this is why they actually upgraded this to a category 1 hurricane. If we look at this closely, you can see that the peak of this was at this green line right here, 70 knots or so, which is equivalent to 75 miles per hour. Of course, hurricane or category 1 status is attained at 74 miles per hour, so we're just a couple miles per hour above the threshold for hurricane status. So you can see this is why they actually upgraded it. They put in, they found the soundings, and they actually found winds up near 70 knots or 75 miles per hour, and for that reason, that's why we actually saw this get upgraded to a category 1 hurricane. So that's what they were looking at, and that's why they actually upgraded it. That blue line right there again is the flight level winds. So that is indicating to them that we are already at category 1 status, and that we could potentially go even further up into category 1 status, potentially a higher end category 1. Taking a look at the actual flight path, you can see that they found the strongest winds on the northern end of the storm, but even along the eastern end of the storm, it was also quite strong in many of these areas. And you can see that the aircraft is actually still going on here. It is still making its exit from the storm to the east. They might even loop back around. I would not be surprised if they loop back around and maybe go back into the center of the storm to see if they can find anything on the western end of the storm. But we've already found what we need to. We already found those category 1 wind speeds on the northern end. Luckily, the strongest winds are not near any islands. So Barbados currently, which is right here, is under some high-end tropical storm force winds, not quite to category 1 force winds, so that's somewhat of a positive. But unfortunately, as this is moving to the Windward Islands, some of those islands, especially further to the north, will actually be impacted with hurricane force winds. taking a look at another aspect of this. This is the sounding from this storm when they made the pass through the storm, and I really want to look at the wind shear, which is in that the chart on the right hand side of your screen. So first thing that I want to highlight is that at the bottom layers of the atmosphere, we have very weak winds, west southwest at about 3 or 4 knots, and that's at the very bottom part of the storm. If we go a little bit higher up into the mid levels of the system, you're now looking at these winds shifting now from the south, and they're now getting a little bit stronger, 8 to 12 knots, but still nothing crazy. And then we start to get a little bit of wind shear up in the middle or even upper parts of the storm. So you can see that in this green area, this is where we're dealing with wind coming out of the south southwest, and this is between about 10 and 13 knots. So that is decent wind shear. We are dealing with some wind shear through the middle and upper parts of this storm, but again, it's nothing crazy, just something that I want to point out. Now we do have some sort of wind shear in this storm, but I don't think that will really play too big of a part in the development of the storm overall. But you can still see that we do have some decent amount of wind shear, especially throughout this middle column of the storm. So we don't have a completely stacked storm, and that could help, especially as you're getting closer to Cuba, especially as you're getting closer to Hispaniola, as it's starting to get a little bit stronger, generating its own wind shear on its own. That could potentially be a factor that we want to look at in maybe another day or two, because it could have maybe bigger ramifications than we're thinking right now. So we're going to want to wait until probably the next pass of the aircraft recon into the storm as we get more data. I really want to see what happens on the western end of the storm, whether they can actually gather any information, because that side of the storm does still look rather intense. So I'm waiting for them to actually pass the aircraft through there, potentially get some wind speed recordings for that area. So that is going to wrap up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.